Yeah, the movie tells a lie. The Perron family didn't need an exorcist. They needed the Warrens to leave. For 10 years, 7 people lived in a house in Rhode Island. You know the house. You saw the movie, The Conjuring, but Hollywood left out the darkest parts. James Wan made the Warrens look like heroes. In reality, Roger Perron punched Ed Warren in the face. He physically threw them off his land. The experts didn't stop the haunting. They actively made the ghosts angry. They turned a scary house into a war zone. The family didn't leave when the movie ended. They stayed for 6 more years. They were trapped by death. They were tortured by a woman with a broken neck. And Bathsheba? She wasn't a witch. She was a victim of a lie that started in the 1800s. Today, we look at the real Arnold estate. We see the blood on the floor Hollywood hid. And we find out why the Warrens were never invited back. James Wan changed everything in 2013. His movie turned the Arnold estate into a household name. He gave us a version of the Warrens that felt like superheroes. They were portrayed as the light in the dark. Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson made them look like polished professionals. The movie ends with a beautiful sunrise. The demons are banished. The family hugs in the yard. This is what we call the Hollywood filter. This mechanism takes a decade of suffering and polishes it for a profit. It squeezes 10 years of trauma into 112 minutes. But the biggest lie was the invitation. In the film, the Perrons are desperate. They go to a seminar and beg for a rescue. In reality, that never happened. Roger and Carolyn Perron didn't seek out experts. They didn't even know who the Warrens were. It was late 1973 in the quiet town of Harrisville. Local gossip about a haunted farm started to spread. The Warrens heard the rumors and simply drove over. They showed up on the doorstep right around Halloween. The family didn't ask for a demonologist. They got one anyway. While the movie shows a heroic rescue, the truth is different. The Warrens were an intrusion, and that intrusion was about to make the house much angrier. The Warrens arrived with a specific type of logic. They didn't see a family in a drafty house. They saw a case to be solved. Lorraine Warren claimed she could feel the vibration of the land. She quickly identified the primary antagonist. She called her Bathsheba. This is where we see the mechanism of spiritual provocation. In the paranormal world, names have weight. By naming a spirit, the Warrens gave it a face. They took a vague, terrifying presence and gave it a biography. This forced a narrative onto the house. It acted like a beacon for the negative energy already there. The family watched as their home became a lab. The experts were poking a hornet's nest. One afternoon, Carolyn was resting on her sofa. A sudden piercing pain shot through her leg. She looked down and saw a perfectly round pool of blood. There was no needle. There was no sharp object in sight. Lorraine didn't reach for a first aid kit. She reached for a theory. She claimed Bathsheba used a knitting needle from the afterlife. She said the ghost was literally stabbing the mother. This specific detail became a cornerstone of the legend. But while the Warrens were building their story, the family was exhausted. They were losing their grip on what was real, and the help they were getting only made the spirits louder. It wouldn't be long before the house fought back. Why didn't they just leave? In the movies, families always stay too long. In real life, the reason is usually boring. It was the 1970s economy. Roger and Carolyn Perron were house poor. They had invested every cent into the Arnold estate. They had 0 equity and 5 kids to feed. This created a mechanism called psychological attrition. Harrisville was an isolated pressure cooker. When you are trapped, your brain begins to fracture. The Perrons lived in a state of constant sleep deprivation. Chronic stress changes how you perceive reality. Science shows that lack of sleep mimics the effects of hauntings. You see shadows in the corners of your eyes. You hear whispers in the white noise of the wind. The movie makes it look like a few weeks of terror. In reality, the family endured this for 3,650 days. They were stuck there from 1971 until 1980. They had to wake up and go to school every morning. They had to pretend to be a normal family in town. Then they would come home to the smell of rotting meat. They heard voices claiming 7 soldiers were buried in the walls. They didn't have the money to run away, so they had to learn to coexist with the darkness. This was a decade-long war of nerves. But while the family fought for sanity, the Warrens built a myth. They focused all their attention on a woman named Bathsheba. And the truth about her is the biggest lie of all. Every horror movie needs a monster. James Wan gave us Bathsheba Sherman. She is shown as a demonic witch hanging from a tree. But history tells a very different story. This is the mechanism of character assassination. The Warrens took a real woman and turned her into a villain. Bathsheba Thayer Sherman was a real person. She was a neighbor in the 1800s. Local legends claim she killed a baby with a needle, but she was never convicted of any crime. She was cleared of all charges in a court of law. She didn't die by suicide on the Parham property. Records show she died of a stroke in 1885. She was in her late 70s. You can still find her grave in the local cemetery. She is buried in consecrated holy ground. That doesn't happen to satanic witches. The truth is even more jarring. Bathsheba didn't even live in the Parham farmhouse. She lived on a completely different farm nearby. The Warrens picked a local scary story and pinned it on the house. Andrea Perron believes the real entity was someone else. She points to the death records of Mrs. Arnold. In 1797, Mrs. Arnold ended her life in the estate's barn. That is a documented historical tragedy on the land. But Mrs. Arnold isn't a scary enough name for a movie. Bathsheba sounds ancient and cursed. The Warrens chose the name that would sell books. By naming the wrong spirit, they made a massive mistake. They focused the family's fear on a lie. This gave the real dark forces room to grow, and it all came to a head during one single night. In the movie, the climax is a heroic exorcism. In reality, it was a disaster. It was late 1974. The Warrens held an unauthorized seance in the basement. They weren't there with the blessing of the church. They were there with a tape recorder and a theory. This is the mechanism of spiritual mismanagement. When you open a door you can't close, things get violent. The family stood in the shadows and watched. Carolyn Perron began to change. Her body snapped into unnatural positions. She started speaking in a language that didn't exist. Suddenly, her chair lifted off the ground. She was thrown across the room like a rag doll. The experts had lost control. Roger Perron didn't see a holy battle. He saw his wife being tortured by a reckless experiment. He didn't thank Ed Warren. He lunged at him. Roger landed a punch squarely on Ed's face. He screamed at them to get out of his house. He physically forced the famous demonologists off his land. The movie hides this because it ruins the hero narrative. It makes the saviors look like amateurs. The Warrens left that night and never returned. But the house didn't go quiet. The seance acted like a dinner bell for the darkness. The family was left alone with something much angrier, and they still had 6 years left to serve in their prison. The Warrens were gone, but the entities remained. The Perrons entered a phase called traumatic bonding. This mechanism happens when you cannot escape a constant threat. You stop fighting the environment. You simply learn to live within it. The 5 daughters began to categorize the spirits. Some were just echoes of the past. They were harmless. They would sweep the floor or murmur in the halls. But others were purely malevolent. Andrea Perron remembers the woman with the broken neck. She would stand by the bed at night. Her head was tilted at an impossible angle. She didn't speak. She just watched. The younger sisters took the brunt of the trauma. They were robbed of a normal childhood. They were constantly exhausted and terrified. To this day, some of them refuse to talk about it. They won't speak to the media. They won't go near Harrisville. The house left a permanent scar on their psyche. It wasn't a movie script for them, it was their actual life. They stayed until 1980. By then, they were different people. The Warrens had moved on to the next headline, but the Perrons were still living in the shadow. Now only one question remains. Who is in the house today? James Wan gave us a story of victory. The Perrons lived a story of survival. The Arnold estate is still there in Harrisville. It is a private residence now. New families come and go. The Warrens' legacy is made of gold and movies. The Perrons' legacy is the silence at family dinners. History is rarely as clean as a movie script. Bathsheba Sherman's name stays in the mud. The real spirits might still be in the barn. Sometimes the experts aren't the cure. Sometimes they are the fuel for the fire. The family survived the house, and they survived the saviors who made it worse. The estate still stands on the hill. The basement is still dark. We just have to hope no one knocks on that door again.